What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 32, second postseason edition here. We've got some interesting things to go over. I am, of course, your co-host, Kyle Morello, and next to me, Jake Copestick. Cope, we had some ups and downs we're going to get into, but how we doing? It is March, after all.
It is March. We're tired. We're working overtime. I gotta be up early tomorrow. You gotta be up early tomorrow. But again, it's March. Push through. We'll move. Great day yesterday. Big Five going 3-0. Unfortunately, it came to a crashing finish as we went 0-3 today in the Big Five. But we got a lot to talk about. It's March.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, so we're going to get right into it here. Going to structure this a little differently than past one, since we have 3 games for each of the A-10 teams and two games for Villanova. So just going to go team by team here. We're going to start off with St. Joseph's. Really encouraging things. Honestly, I'm most optimistic about what we saw from them over the weekend. I know obviously it's the season's over now, so no moral victories here, but we're gonna go over it real quick. They beat Loyola on Wednesday, on Tuesday, 72-67. Lynn Greer had a double-double, 22 and 10. Cameron Brown had 16 and 6. Sloppy game. There were some turnovers down the stretch, like we had mentioned on our Twitter and Instagram too. Sloppy game, turnovers down the stretch. Eric Reynolds was in foul trouble, didn't have his best game, but they prevailed against a feisty team like Loyola that was playing better down the stretch here. So they moved on to play George Washington on Wednesday, and they won that one too, 87-76. Honestly, in my opinion, you can share yours when we wrap up here, but I think this was one of the best games they played this year. Honestly, it was close in the first half. They were actually down a little bit too, and early in the second half, and then they just started shooting the lights out. Eric Reynolds had a career high 34 points. Cameron Brown had 18 and 7. Rasheer Fleming, great game, 12 and 8. And they only had 6 turnovers as a team, which you love to see. I mean, especially for a team like St. Joe's that's been prone to turnovers this year. So a great showing by them. They ended up taking the rubber match against George Washington, which we love to see. Unfortunately, it came to a halt Thursday night against Dayton, losing 60-54, a game that was close-ish at halftime. They ended up going down a decent amount in the second half, came all the way back, made a 3-point game, almost got a couple steals in the last couple possessions, but ultimately fell short. Eric Reynolds had 19 points on 7 of 19, but nobody else was in double figures. They only shot 32% from the field, though Dayton also only shot 36%, and they were 10 of 36 from 3. So we talked about this Dayton defense this year being really, really good, and they performed that way once again against this feisty St. Joe's team. But Cope, I guess your takeaways from the 2 wins, your takeaways from the loss, and even maybe a little ode to the season. I don't know. We're gonna have episodes on these team seasons as we go further into the off season here, but the Hawks are done, and it's a little sad.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime you end your season, it's sad for sure. It just feels like it comes up so quick. You finish the regular season and it's like, damn, it's do or die. If you want to get to the semifinals, you got St. Joe's and LaSalle having to play 3 games in 3 days. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I do think both these teams didn't shoot great. Yeah, they went up against good defenses, but I think they didn't really have their legs under them, especially having to play against a team in your 3rd straight game that's got a double bye, and that's got fresh legs. So the first game got off to a pretty good start. Second half, though, Loyola 0 for 16 this year when going into the half with a deficit. They come out and they hit 2 threes to tie this game up. But even without Eric Reynolds, he was in foul trouble, picked up 2 quick fouls in about 90 seconds. They were still able to prevail here. Lynn Greer if he played against Loyola every game, I mean, he'd be a first-team All-American. I just loved playing against the Ramblers. He had a really good game. They were able to close this game out at the end. He had a huge play. They went on a bad field goal drought over 5 minutes in the second half. He got the ball in the corner, drove baseline, found Christian Winborn, who also had a really good game in that Loyola game in the absence of Eric Reynolds, which is definitely encouraging to see. Because the freshmen, whether that's Bleachmore, but mainly Fleming and then Winborn a little bit, they really started to come alive here, and they had a really good game. So they had to switch their defense. I really liked what they did with the 3-2 zone in both games, and really all 3 games, really ever since Eduque Obina we found out he was not going to play. I like the switch they made to the 3-2 zone, having Fleming at the middle. His activity, they basically just took their press and put it back into a half court, and Fleming was really good at the top of the press all season. So the GW game was awesome. They got contributions, especially from their big three. But Eric Reynolds he's that dude. I really hope he comes back and can be the centerpiece for them. He really showed that he could. He showed flashes of it his freshman year, and he definitely showed it that he could be this year. But the theme from the Dayton game, I'm going to bring up the same for LaSalle when I talk about their game against Fordham. I just don't know if they had their legs under them. It looked like they were tired a little bit. Now, what I loved the most about this game was it didn't matter how many points they were down, they clawed back to make this a close game. Eric Reynolds hit a 3, then he hit a layup to cut the lead here. And although they lost, I was extremely encouraged by that. They had a couple chances where they could have made this a one-possession game, potentially tied it up, but make a 3, they get a stop, they come back down. There was a play where Kasper Klotcher got the ball in the corner, threw up a 3 that was an air ball. I thought they could have got something better. And then Eric Reynolds came down and had a turnover on the last possession. So they definitely had their chances, but you got to love the fight from this team, especially down the stretch in the second half where they're clawing back. Dayton's fresh. They're on their third game in 3 days. But you love the fight from them. They almost stole it. They just came up short in the end. So great for them. They had a nice stretch in the latter half of the season where they went, I think they were 7 of 10. They won to pick up 2 wins in the A-10 tournament and then kind of push Dayton to the brink here. It's definitely promising. Hate to see it end like that, but 2 solid wins for them, especially the GW game, like you mentioned. And unfortunately, they just came up short here. But you have to be encouraged with the effort, and then we'll get to it in future episodes. But I think the future on Hawk Hill looks pretty bright when you talk about especially the latter half of the season and the run they made in the Atlantic 10 tournament.
Yeah, and you mentioned the effort and fight they showed. I mean, it's just a lot of heart, and I'm really glad because there was times this year where they could have just rolled over and said, "Oh, another bad season. It's going to go the way it's always gone the last however many years on Hawk Hill." But they showed a lot of fight, and they showed a lot of fight specifically in this Dayton game, and I think they're in a great position going forward. I think they're a talented young team. Obviously, we're going to talk about them in the future, but things to take away from this Dayton game, very encouraging. Unfortunately, their season had to come to an end, but at least they showed fight and they can hang their hat on that, which is something to be proud of. All right, moving on to the other A-10 team here, LaSalle. Their season is also over, but we're going to get into all 3 of these games real quick. They beat Rhode Island on Tuesday, 73-56. Jameer Brickus, 18 points on 7 of 10. Tayshawn Shepard, 15 and 11 on 7 of 10. Great game from him. They shot 58% in this one, and they won the rebounding margin 48-31. So it was kind of a wire-to-wire victory against this Rhode Island team, which I will give you your credit. You were right. I was wrong. This is definitely a good win for LaSalle. One they didn't really have to sweat too much. This next one they did sweat a little bit, at least in the first half, though they beat Duquesne 81-70. Like I said, they were down 8 late in the first half. It ended up being 6 at halftime. And then they just caught fire in the second half. Jameer Brickus, 23 points on 6 of 11 from the field. Khalil Brantley, 22 points on 7 of 14 from the field. They shot 51% overall in the game. Duquesne only 35% from the field. And they shot 42% from 3, the Explorers did. So great on them. They did get killed in the offensive glass 18-7, which did not benefit them. But the fact they still won the game by 11, especially after being down. And Duquesne was on a run late in that first half where it looked like, oh God, like this could get ugly quick. And they held them off, and they came back, and they ended up winning by double digits. So credit to them. As we talked about with St. Joe's, a lot of heart, a lot of fight, and they absolutely showed that coming back against Duquesne. And they did show it even in their loss to Fordham, which was on Thursday night, 69-61. They were down in this game for a lot of the game. They did make it not insanely interesting, not as interesting as St. Joe's did to Dayton, but they kept it within 8 points, 6 points for a lot of that second half. Ultimately, they did fall, though. Khalil Brantley, 18 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists in this one. Jameer Brickus, 13 points. They only shot 38% from the field, whereas Fordham shot 46. They're only 5 of 20 from 3. One thing that I think the difference in this game, too, was the fact that they had 22 fouls to Fordham's 13, which resulted in 24 free throws for Fordham, and only 12 for LaSalle. So I think, kind of like you mentioned, and I'm going to let you get into it even more, that this is a grind. This is the hardest time of year to be able to perform day in and day out. Conference tournament week, you're playing every day, except for some tournaments where there's some days in between. But for the most part, you're playing every day. This is 3 games in 3 days for LaSalle here, and they ultimately fell short against a good Fordham team. But I think part of that had to do with just the fact that they retired.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'll get into the Rhode Island game first, which Dunn told you. Without Brayon Freeman, this is a team that struggles already offensively a lot. They don't shoot the three well. They really just don't shoot well in general. They like to get to the free throw line. 28 free throw attempts in this game for Rhode Island, but they don't really shoot them. At least they're not in this game. They were 17 and 28, but 5 and 22 from three. They shot under 30% from the field. I knew they were going to struggle without him. And, you look at the numbers. Ishmael Leggett, the leading scorer, had 11 points, 4 of 19 from the field. They just didn't shoot the ball well. LaSalle had a good game plan, go under on every screen, force these guys and dare them to shoot, and it worked out for them. So they were able to pick up a big win, dominated on the glass. Really just an all-around great win from them, and a really, really good game kind of to consummate Deshaun Shepard's season with 15-11. He had 2 steals and a block in this game as well, made 7 of his 10 shots, was huge off the bench. Jameer Brickus, I mean, you look at the 3 games he put up here, especially the first 2, he was terrific. 18 points, was also 7 of 10 from the field in this first game. The Duquesne game was the one that was really, really my favorite, and I think would be everybody's, because there's a team that not long ago put up 91 points at Tom Golo-Reno in the Explorers. So for them to be able to slow them down, seemed like they got in their head a little bit and really started to bother them. And Brickus had a good game there as well. So did Brantley. Really, really good game all around from them. LaSalle, only 2 guys in double figures, but Khalil Brantley with 22, Jameer Brickus with 23. All that they needed for this game against Duquesne. This is a team that shot over 55% from the field. The last time at Tom Gold Arena, you mentioned how they struggled. LaSalle did a good job closing out on them. It was a tough game for sure. Now, you're right, they got killed in the offensive rebound. They did win the rebounding battle overall. But, you look at Joe Reese the last game. It was 11 of 13, killed him down low, was 3 of 11 this game, which is huge. Jimmy Clark had 27, but for Day Grant and Tevin Brewer to go 10 of 28, then to go 5 of 16 from 3, you'll definitely take that when you go against 2 really good scoring guards in this conference. And then this Fordham game, it's tough. I think I kind of nailed the analysis there. It was basically a pseudo home game for Fordham. They sold out the student tickets. There was a lot of fans and alumni there. It was basically a home game for them. They've been playing very well. It's definitely a deserved seed that they have to get the double bye. Keith Argo's done a really good job there. But Darius Quisenberry killed him. Khalid Moore had a double-double in this game. Quisenberry had some really big buckets down low. He had a bank shot at the end of the shot clock, and then he had a big 3. His only remake of the game came with 45 seconds left, and that was kind of the dagger. But again, they fought. Khalil Brantley had an and one. He just missed a free throw that could have made this game a 3-point game. So, again, you have to like the fight. They really emptied the tank here. Both teams did, St. Joe's and LaSalle. Good runs that they had. It's tough. And then you look at LaSalle. They played Saturday against Loyola Chicago. So this was their 4th game in 6 days. So definitely a grind for them to even make it a close one here. They were cold. They didn't make a 3 in the first half, which hurt them. But the second half, they were able to knock some down. Really didn't shoot a great percentage anyway, but you have to love the fight from them. It's a team that's got fresh legs, basically a home game for them, with all the fans just having to come from the Bronx to go to the Barclays Center. So I have to love the effort from LaSalle. Unfortunately, they fell short. And it's wide open. This conference is wide open. I think we all knew it was probably going to be VCU, St. Louis, Fordham, Dayton. The chalk, unfortunately, is kind of prevailing here. But they took a good team to the brink at beat them at the buzzer, essentially at Tom Gold Arena early this year, and you have to definitely laud their effort for it. So unfortunately, it's going to come to an end, and the first season under Fran Dunphy on 20th and Only is going to come to a close. But a lot of encouraging things as well, and you have to be excited about the future because expectations were very low here to start the season, and Fran Dunphy was able to make something out of this. They won a couple games in the A-10 tournament, so good on them. And it's unfortunate it's got to come to a close.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about with St. Joe's being in a good position for the future. I think LaSalle is too. Um, I think in his post-game press conference, Coach Dunphy mentioned that the only person that isn't eligible to be back is Mamadou Decore, who has no eligibility left. But besides that, all the other guys, if they want to, can come back. And I don't know if all of them will want to. They might go other places. They might stay. I don't know. It's good. Like I said, further down the road, we can talk about that in future episodes regarding these teams. But another team that can hang their hat on a good performance to end the season, even though they came up short. Great effort. Their third game and third day, like you said, their fourth game in 6 days. It's hard. It's really hard on your body, and they did the best they could. And it sucks that it's over, but as a saying that you and I both know, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. So, uh, definitely encouraging signs from LaSalle and St. Joe's, obviously too. All right. Last but not least, we've got the Villanova Wildcats, who unfortunately season is also over. Don't even want to spend a ton of time in this first game. They thoroughly dominated Georgetown 80-48. Cam Whitmore had a great game, 19 points and 10 rebounds on 8 of 11 from the field. Justin Moore, 13 and 6. And Mark Armstrong and Brandon Housen had 10 each. So great game all around for the Wildcats there. And you had mentioned that this could be the end of the Patrick Ewing era for Georgetown, and it was. It was announced today that he was let go from the university. So the Patrick Ewing era is officially over. And I'm not going to say that we're surprised. Unfortunately, he's a Georgetown legend, as we talked about, but unfortunately, his time is up there. But it was, and I don't want to disrespect Georgetown, but it was kind of a clock in, clock out deal here. I mean, they just dominated them the entire game. Unfortunately, that success did not carry over into Thursday night's game against Creighton, where they lost 87-74. Some notables here: Eric Dixon, 20 points on 7 of 16 from the field. Caleb Daniels and Brandon Slater, 17 points each on a combined 11 of 22. Justin Moore, 13 and 7 on 5 of 12. They were out rebounded 34-27. They allowed the Blue Jays to shoot 48% from three and 49% from the field. And all 5 Creighton starters were in double figures, which isn't a huge surprise considering we've talked about this year how they are a very short rotation team. They really only play, their starters and maybe 1 or 2 more. But all 5 were in double figures. They're led by Kalkbrenner with 21 points and Baylor Shireman with 12 and 12. So unfortunately, this is the end of Nova's run. They played really, really well down the stretch here. Unfortunately lost 2 out of the 3 though. 2 of them being 2 really good teams, unfortunately. But listen, it was kind of just a case of too little, too late with this Nova team down the stretch of the season, or through the course of the season, where they struggled, and then obviously they went on a little bit of a run late. But this loss to Creighton, I can't say I didn't see it coming, to be honest with you. Creighton's a great team. I know they lost at the Wells Fargo Center, and Creighton won when they were playing at their place, but it's just a really good team, and their defense prevailed. And they always say defense wins championships, and I don't know if they're going to win the Big East championship or even the national championship, obviously, but this was just unfortunately a really good team that Nova ran into.
Yeah, and there was a hot shooting team. I mentioned in my little preview that we put out today that this game was probably going to come down to threes because Villanova struggled in the first game, and then the second game they caught fire and they were able to beat this team by double digits. And then you look at this game, 12 of 25 from 3 for Creighton. Now Nova made 13 of their own, but they allowed them to shoot almost 50% from behind the arc. They got off to a bit of a cold start, and the problem with that is this is a Creighton team that when their 5 starters are on, which they were tonight, it's hard, and they were just kind of digging themselves out of a hole the whole game because they went down 18-7 and just kind of tried to claw their way back from that. And a problem with this team all year is sometimes their offense, when it goes cold, they become 3 happy and they take way too many jump shots. And that's just kind of what happened here. And then defensively, they gave up way too many transition threes, way too many open ones, and that's what killed them because a good chunk of these threes that Creighton was able to hit, a lot of them were pretty quality looks. So the second half, I think they did play a lot better. They cut the lead to single digits a couple times, but again, you talk about the season and you talk about the second half in this game, it's just too little, too late. So Cam Whitmore had a rough game. He only had 4 points. I thought he was fortunate a little bit, which he's done a little bit this year, and that's kind of the problem with their offense sometimes is that I think he can force some early shots and some tough looks, because they're a lot better, obviously, when you have a top 10 pick on your team that's producing that definitely does a lot for you. But really good game for Brandon Slater. He hit all four of his threes, and they were able to claw back here. But Kalkbrenner had a really good game, and so did Ryan Nembhard. And Ryan Nembhard, what makes him a great point guard is he's so composed and he's able to probe in the lane really, really effectively. Eric Dixon was playing really, really deep in the paint because they didn't want to give up layups or lob attempts to Kalkbrenner, who would just stick his hands up and go over him. And because of that, he's able to probe so patiently. He's able to get a guy on his hip, on his back, and then he can either dump it off or he can finish at the rim. So they were playing very, very conservatively, not trying to let Kalkbrenner kill them tonight, which he did have 21 points, made 9 of his 12 shots. So too little, too late. They got a little 3 happy, and they were just kind of digging themselves out of a hole the whole game. And even when they were able to cut this lead to single digits, this Creighton team always had an answer for him. Georgetown game, I'll just touch on it quick. I don't want to mention too much of it yet. It's just kind of meh because it was a thorough domination. If I was a Georgetown fan, and I even said this in my preview, like I didn't even want to say anything too crazy or try and kick them when they're down. Like I was like almost sad for Georgetown fans watching that game. I mean, the defense was non-existent. Guys were getting inside the 3-point line and getting to the rim and getting whatever they wanted for Villanova, and we were to hit some threes. And then offensively, I mean, there's a team in Georgetown that does not shoot the ball well, and they threw up some pretty bad shots. So it was just a really bad performance all around for them. Now the Patrick Ewing era is over. I already saw that Denver Anglin, who's from North Jersey, he's a freshman, already put his name in the portal before the news came down. So we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, unfortunately for them, they did catch a little bit of fire late. I think the UConn loss took a little bit of wind out of their sails because that's a damn good team that really in the second half of their season finale at the Wells Fargo Center really, really dominated them. So it's a shame that it ended this way because I think we all expected a lot more. And I think we're all kind of wondering what could it have been if Cam Whitmore and Justin Moore would have been healthy the whole year, because they really hit their stride late. But again, it was not enough for being that deep in. So we'll see if they get an NIT berth. I think they will, with how good Justin Moore has been and how well they've been playing when he's been in the lineup. I think that they will get an NIT berth, but they got one game at the guard, and they needed to get 4 of them if they wanted to make the tournament. Unfortunately, they came up short. So I don't think it's a bad season. I think there's things you can take away. There's a lot of expectations, obviously, coming off the Final Four, but you lose your coach, you lose some of your biggest guys, you don't start the year healthy. Oh, there's a lot of things we could say, oh, it could have been this way, could have been that way, but here we are. Hopefully they can still keep playing. They just came up short here making the NCAA tournament. So I think Kyle Neptune's the right guy for the job. I don't think this is really his fault or you can point too many fingers at him, but we'll see how it goes with them coming up in the future. But I think especially late in the season and especially with how the freshmen played in the Georgetown game and some of the performances that Mark Armstrong was putting up, I think you can be happy at least with what your program's after Villanova.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're Villanova. They're a blue chip program. They're one of the best programs in the country, even without Jay Wright, even with Kyle Neptune being in there instead. Like they've got guys and they're gonna be fine. This was a year where they had some things working against them, like you mentioned, especially at the beginning of the year. And when it all came together at the end, I mean, at one point they had won 6 of 7. So it's just it's a matter of timing, and especially when they played in as competitive as tournament as the one they did in Oregon, which kind of started their downward trend early in the season. It was tough to recover, but they did the best they could, and I think they'll be fine going forward. Trust me. As you and I both know, Villanova doesn't stay down for too long if they ever are down. So unfortunately their season's over, but there will be more to come from them. All right. So that's 3 teams that are unfortunately eliminated, but there's 2 teams still remaining. We're gonna go over their games right now for the weekend. And hopefully this isn't the final game previews we have this year, but if it is, we're gonna give it our best. So here we go. Temple taking on Cincinnati Friday at 3:00. That, of course, is at Dickies Arena in down there in Texas. And the Cincinnati team we're familiar with. They've played them twice already this year. They split their season series. Most recently, it was a game in Cincinnati that went to overtime that Cincinnati won. But a little bit about this Bearcats team. They're 64th in KenPom, 55th in offense, 77th in defense, 26th in turnover percentage, 60th in defensive effective field goal percentage, And a couple things they don't do well: 339th in free throw attempts for field goal attempts and 231st in free throw percentage. So it's honestly one of Temple's strengths is free throw percentage. So that could be an advantage for them in this one. Definitely think Damian Dunn needs to make sure he tries to get in the paint, get to the line. And it's obviously not just him, but he's really good at doing that, and he shoots really good percentage from the line. However, I do think this is unfortunately going to be the end of Temple season 2. I just don't know if they have the firepower to match up with some of Cincy's best guys. I know they went to overtime recently, after Caleb Battle left the team, and Damian Dunn played a really good game in that one too. But I still think it's going to be another year where Temple does not win a game in the American tournament, unfortunately. And I hate to be that guy. I'm wearing my Owls sweatshirt. We're both Temple alums, but I think this might be the end of the road for the Owls, and I'm going to take Cincinnati in a close one, but I am going to take Cincinnati here. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I'm going to agree with you. You look at the last time these two teams played, because the first time at the Liacouras Center, I mean, they dominated them. They killed them on the glass. Jaleel White, I think, it's 16 boards in that game. Cincinnati was taking a lot of bad shots, and Temple's doing a good job of limiting them to just one shot on the offensive end for the Bearcats. Then they go to overtime. They have to go to Fifth Third Arena to go to Cincinnati and play him. Damian Dunn, 34 points, got to the line 14 times. Isaiah Miller flirting with the triple-double with 13, 7, and 7. But I just don't know. I agree with that. I don't know if they have the offensive firepower, if these guys are going to have another good game. Landers, Nolly, David, Julius, the two engines for this team, both going for 20. I'm going to agree with you. I don't think they have much left in the tank here, unfortunately, and it really pains me to say that because we had some pretty lofty expectations for this team if they were able to stay healthy and click together. Fortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be the 4th year in a row in McKee's tenure. Now, granted, we didn't play the COVID year, but I think this is another year where, unfortunately, McKee is going to go winless in the AAC tournament down there in Fort Worth. It's going to be big for him. I think they might limp to the finish line here. I love the fight they had in the Tulane game. I thought they could have stole it. Pretty questionable foul by Nick Jourdain at the end, but to come down from almost 16 on the road against the third best team in the AAC and the Tulane Green Wave, definitely encouraging. But I don't know if they're going to have it here. I think Wes Miller's going to have something for them, and they're going to end up winning. So I'm going to take the Bearcats. I'm going to agree with you. Unfortunately, and hopefully Damian Dunn, I know his status is kind of up in the air. Is he going to come back? Is he not? Hopefully he does, and they can continue to build with some of the guys they have here. But as far as this season goes, I think unfortunately it's going to end tomorrow after they tip off at 3:00.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with you too, which would only leave us with one, and that would be the Penn Quakers taking on Princeton Tigers Saturday at 1:30. Of course, this game is at Princeton, a game which we will be covering. So definitely make sure you look out for our tweets and Instagram content then. But on the game, Princeton, 117th in KenPom, 111th in offense, 137th in defense. They're 72nd in effective field goal percentage on offense and 57th on defense. They're 40th in 2-point percentage on offense and 55th in the same category on defense. And one thing they do not do well, 351st in the country in defensive turnover percentage. They don't force a lot of turnovers. Obviously, we mentioned the last time these two teams played, which was the last game for both these two teams last Saturday. A game in which Penn blew a 17-point lead at halftime and ended up losing to Princeton. However, I don't think the same result's going to happen this time, Cope. I am confident that the Quakers are going to win this one. Is it a little bit of blind confidence? Potentially, but I know that they played really, really well in that first half. I know that they can find a recipe for success because they've had success against this Princeton team, even if it wasn't over the course of a full game. But I think if they can make some adjustments, and obviously the biggest thing is shooting the ball better because they had a horrendous shooting performance in the second half of that game last week. But I said last time, listen, Penn, if there's going to be anything you can take from this game is that if they don't win this game, maybe they'll win the next one when it counts a little more. And not that they wanted to give up the last game, obviously, but I think it's going to motivate them this time to get the job done. And I do think they're going to get the job done. I think they're going to beat Princeton and move on to the Ivy League final, which will be on Sunday. And they'll take on either Yale or Cornell. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna stay consistent with what I've said all year that I think they're good enough to win the Ivy League. And then when they had their last back-to-back homestand of the season, when they played Yale on Friday and then they came back and they played Brown on Saturday, I said they were gonna sweep that. They were gonna beat Dartmouth the next week. They were gonna clinch their spot. They were gonna get to the Ivy League tournament, and then they were gonna win 2 games and make the big dance. So I'm gonna stay consistent with that. I think you're absolutely right. This is gonna motivate them, and it's very, very daunting because now it's do or die. Your back's against the wall. You have to play the same team that you just played last Saturday at the same gym, which, funny enough, they stopped playing games at the Palestro so they could make it even, and they'll rotate it. Last year they get Yale at their place. This year they get Princeton at their place. Funny how that works.
How fitting.
But I am going to go with the Quakers here. They had a really, really good first half. Like I mentioned in our last episode, I like the game plan that they had. They had George Smith on the perimeter with Tosan, just as a guy that could slide with him and put his chest in front of the ball, and a quicker guy that could stay in front of him. Then when Princeton wanted to run cross screens to get Tosan open on the block, they were already pre-switching so that by the time that he caught the ball, he had a big arm. I really like the game plan that they had. Jordan Dingle was scorching hot in the first half and then really cooled off in the second half and really wasn't able to hit anything. But Clark Slacker struggled in the 2 games that they played. I think this is finally a better game from him, and they're really going to need it from him if they're going to win. And I think Dingle's going to bring him home and continue the success that he had in the first half of this game. And I think this game will look more like the first half for him and not the second half. But this is a very, very sound and fundamentally good Princeton team. They play very well on both sides of the ball. Both these teams don't force a lot of turnovers. And in both of these games, there hasn't been an outlier game where you can point to, oh, well, turnovers lost one team the game. Now, the first matchup, we talked about how Penn did not make a three for the first time in over a decade. Shot a little bit better here, albeit just over 30%. I think that number could rise a little bit. I just think they're going to be playing a lot more motivated. Although Princeton beat this team twice, has them at their home gym again, and it's a very, very tough and daunting challenge, like I've said. I do think the Quakers will pull it out here, will be in attendance, and I think that they will win and they will play the first championship game at noon on Sunday before the bracket comes out. So I'm going to take them to win here. I'm going to stay consistent. Like I said, I'm going to take them to win it all and win on Sunday, but it starts here. You have to get this one. And against their biggest rival, Mitch Henderson, in all honesty, he's got a very, very good record against Steve Donahue, and it's kind of been Steve Donahue's kryptonite. But I'm going to roll with the Quakers here. They're going to build off the momentum they had in the first half. They'll put together a good 40 minutes, or maybe more if they have to. But I'm going to roll with the Quakers here. With their backs against the wall, with a bad loss last week that they definitely feel like they should have won, they're going to pull it out here, and they're going to advance to the championship.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's do or die. It's March. So either they beat Princeton and move on, or they lose and they go home. It's the only 2 options. And I think with their backs against the wall, like you mentioned, they'll get it done. And I think they'll move on to face either Yale or Cornell on Sunday. That's all we got for this one. Any thoughts here? A lot of basketball that's been played over these last few days, not just in the Big Five, but all over the country. So I'm sure your mind's probably a little crazy, but anything worth mentioning here before we sign off?
Well, I could mention a billion things today. I was off work. Obviously, I got to go in early tomorrow. Me and you are putting in a lot of hours tomorrow because we got to get up early. But yeah, it was great. I sat down. I had a cup of coffee in the morning. It was 11 a.m. and there was already game tipping off. It was great. This is the best time of the year. All I did today was watch basketball, which in my eyes was a productive day. In the eyes of other people, probably not. That's all right. I had so much fun today watching basketball continue throughout the weekend. And unless we decide to do an emergency episode, or we decide to record a little bit earlier. Maybe if hopefully Penn doesn't lose, fingers crossed saying that. If we decide to talk Saturday, maybe to recap these games or whatnot. But if we don't do an episode before Sunday, Kyle, the next time you'll hear from us, we will have a bracket in our hands, and that feels pretty damn good to say. So it's going to be great. It's already a great week. 2 weeks, I guess, kind of conference tournaments. I know we're gonna have a great weekend here as we finish strong. The Mountain West, all the big time tournaments are now going into their semifinals, and they're gonna start playing championship games soon. So it's the best time of the year. I'm enjoying it. I'm probably watching way too much basketball, having way too much screen time, but that's okay because I'll get out and do something to be productive when it's done. It's March. All I'm doing is watching basketball. I'm having so much fun doing it. Hopefully, the next time that you hear from us, well, hopefully, if we have something to talk about, we'll do it. We'll update you guys, but we're going to have a bracket in our hands very soon.
Exactly. And regardless if either Penn or Temple make the NCAA tournament, we're gonna have an episode on the tournament regardless, just because, it's the one time a year we get to talk about a fresh bracket. And there's not much more that makes either of us happy than that. So we're gonna have an episode next week regardless to going over the tournament. But I am praying that one of these teams gets there so we have a full preview to talk about of whatever game, whoever they would be matched up against. Um, but regardless, we're going to talk about the brackets because we're here, man. This is March. Brackets come out in a couple days. Let's go. We're here. Um, but anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, very much appreciate your love and support. Make sure you like, subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Big Five Pod, and make sure you listen to our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we are praying that we get to talk about some more game previews this year, hopefully in the NCAA tournament. We'll keep you guys updated, of course, on our social medias on whatever content we might have. But until then, we will see you next time.